Biologically speaking, the primary goal of any living organism on this planet is to successfully reproduce and ensure the continuation of its species. It is the fundamental hardwired directive of life. But if you try to execute this basic biological imperative in the modern United States, the economy will immediately treat you as if you just decided to take up a wildly irresponsible, hyper-expensive luxury hobby, roughly on par with purchasing a fleet of recreational submarines. We have somehow constructed an economic system that actively and aggressively financially penalizes its citizens for creating the next generation of taxpayers. Let us look at the raw, terrifying mathematics of having a child in the American economy today. For a brief, terrifying moment, let us ignore the hospital bill for the actual birth, which is a whole other horrifying video, and skip straight to what happens when parental leave runs out. By the way, the United States is the only developed nation on the planet that does not guarantee paid maternity leave, which means running out usually happens approximately 3 to 6 weeks after a major medical event. So, you have to go back to work to pay for the roof over your baby's head, but you cannot leave an infant home alone to fend for themselves with a bowl of Cheerios and a television remote. You need childcare. This is where you hit the wall, the Daycare Cliff. Across the United States, the average cost of center-based infant childcare has skyrocketed past $10,000 a year. In major metropolitan areas, it routinely blows past $24,000 a year. Let me repeat that number, $2,000 a month. That is not private school tuition. That is not a specialized academy for gifted toddlers. That is simply a safe room with qualified adults to make sure your baby does not accidentally swallow a Lego while you are at the office. For millions of working-class and middle-class families, daycare now mathematically eclipses their rent or their mortgage. You are effectively paying a second mortgage for a house you do not get to live in. This creates a catastrophic paradox at the kitchen table. A young couple sits down with a calculator and realizes something mathematically devastating. One of their entire salaries, down to the absolute last penny, is going entirely toward paying for the daycare required to allow them to earn that salary. The math begins to eat its own tail. So, what is the logical outcome? The lower-earning parent, which due to deeply ingrained societal structures and the gender pay gap is overwhelmingly the mother, simply drops out of the workforce. It is cheaper to quit a functioning career than to pay someone to watch your child. This is the great American economic self-sabotage. Politicians will stand at podiums and scream until they are red in the face about labor shortages, falling birth rates, and the desperation for economic growth. Yet they sit back and watch as millions of highly educated, capable, experienced workers are forcibly ejected from the labor market because the cost of keeping their child alive during business hours is more expensive than their pre-tax income. And here is the most infuriating twist. You would assume that because parents are paying exorbitant, blood-curdling fees for daycare, the people actually working at the daycare must be making a fortune, right? They must be driving luxury cars and taking vacations in the south of France. No. Childcare workers are some of the lowest paid professionals in the country. Many of them make near minimum wage. They are entrusted with the most valuable, fragile things in our society during their most critical developmental years, and they often do not make enough money to afford childcare for their own kids. The parents are going bankrupt and the teachers are living in poverty. The entire industry is a failing market. Why? Because the United States views childcare as a strictly private, individual problem. The prevailing cultural attitude is, you chose to have a kid, you figure out how to pay for it. We treat raising children like a completely isolated choice, deliberately ignoring the fact that society fundamentally requires these children to exist. In 30 years, who do you think is going to be paying the taxes, fixing the roads, staffing the hospitals, and running the economy? The kids that the current system is bankrupting their parents to raise. To see a society that actually understands how macroeconomics works, you have to look at a country that treats childcare not as a personal luxury, but as critical national infrastructure. Let us look at Denmark. In Denmark, the phrase childcare crisis does not exist in the cultural vocabulary. It is a solved problem. And it is not solved by magic. It is solved by treating early childhood education with the exact same seriousness as the fire department or the highway system. When a child in Denmark turns 6 months old, the government guarantees them a spot in a high-quality, regulated daycare or preschool. But here's the critical difference. The cost to the parents is strictly legally capped. By law, parents in Denmark pay a maximum of 25% of the actual operating cost of the childcare facility. The government covers the remaining 75%. And if you are a low-income family, the government covers 100%. It is completely free. The average Danish family pays roughly a third of what an American family pays for childcare, and the quality is completely off the charts. We are not talking about stuffing 30 toddlers into a fluorescent-lit basement. We are talking about forest kindergartens, where children spend their days outside in nature, learning socialization, empathy, and emotional regulation from highly respected, well-compensated educators. In Denmark, early childhood educators are paid living wages because the society respects the science that the first 5 years of a human's life are the most neurologically critical period in their entire existence. How does Denmark afford this? How did they avoid going completely bankrupt, subsidizing hundreds of thousands of toddlers? Because it is an investment with an astronomical return. By aggressively subsidizing childcare, Denmark completely eliminates the Daycare Cliff. Women do not have to torpedo their careers when they have a baby. Denmark has one of the highest maternal workforce participation rates on the planet. Both parents can go back to work, advance in their careers, start businesses, and, crucially, continue paying income taxes. The math is incredibly clear, and numerous economic studies have proven it. When the government subsidizes childcare, the resulting bump in the gross domestic product from keeping parents in the workforce actively pays for the subsidies. It generates more tax revenue than it costs to run the program. It is a machine that prints economic stability. But in the United States, we're blinded by stubborn hyper-individualism. We refuse to invest a single dollar of public money to fix the foundation of the house, and then we act completely shocked when the roof caves in. We are losing billions of dollars in GDP every single year because we're forcing parents out of the economy, while simultaneously complaining that nobody wants to work anymore. We are treating the biological continuation of the human race as an elite financial privilege. We are telling an entire generation that they must choose between having a family and having financial security, because our system refuses to allow them to have both. Until we stop treating childcare like a luxury good and start treating it like the fundamental economic infrastructure it actually is, the American family will continue to be crushed under the weight of an impossible math equation. I'm Norman, and I need to go figure out if I can legally claim a houseplant as a dependent on my tax return.